the logical end is now upon us, where the debt is growing exponentially fast. And so to service that debt, you've got to create more and more cash, more and more liquidity, just to kind of keep the wheel spinning. And at some point, as it just continues to grow and compound, you go parabolic. And that's kind of the phase we're getting into. History has shown in the past that every time that this has been tried, going all the way back to the Romans, it collapses on itself.
Hey friends, Sean from SGT Report here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I think you're really going to enjoy this gripping interview with Craig Hemke from TF Metals. Craig is spot on, and he knows exactly what the international criminal banksters are up to. So friends, before we get to that, just a quick word from this interview's sponsor. As you guys know, Father's Day is approaching, and a great gift idea for him, or me, guys, I'm a dad, is the solar water heater. An amazing device which allows you to heat and boil water outdoors using sunlight. Depending on conditions, the solar water heater can heat water in as little as 30 minutes, and it will work anywhere the sun is shining. You can use it to boil water, cook noodles and rice, or sterilize water for drinking. The solar water heater is the perfect tool in times of need or when you're camping. Limited supplies last, and it's your last chance to get 15% off the new 2020 model before they're gone. Take advantage now and give the perfect gift for Dad this holiday. Use coupon code SGT15 to save big. Please visit solarwaterheater.com. I'll leave the link below this interview. All right, friends, let's begin. Guys, joining me right now is Craig Hemke. That's Turd Ferguson, a.k.a. from tfmetalsreport.com, a longtime friend to Truth and SGT Report. How are you, Craig?
John, it's always a pleasure to visit with you. I'm stressed. I'm all that stuff, just like anybody else. But we're here. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. They're throwing the kitchen sink at us at this point, man, and the hammer, Antifa. We'll get to that in a second. Your website, you did the right thing a long time ago. You went behind a paywall, tfmetalsreport.com, and you have some fantastic information over there. Do you want to tell people about it and how they can sign up just real briefly, and then we'll get started?
Yeah, Sean, thanks. Yeah, I've been at this about the same amount of time, I think 2010. And in 13, it just dawned on me that I had to make some changes. And it became a job, right? And I got bills. If websites aren't free, neither is health insurance.
Yeah.
Whole other story. So anyway, access to my site, it's a whopping $12 a month, right? So we didn't want to price anybody out. I'm not trying to get rich on the thing, but I do have bills to pay. Anyway, it's tfmetalsreport.com. It's my analysis every day. I do a podcast every day. We try to keep people up to speed on some of the big picture stuff that I'm sure you and I will talk about today. But the community is great too. The community of members is probably the greatest value, having access to that. People around the world, every political stripe, all interacting. The rule, the site's kind of the golden rule. You want to treat others the way you want to be treated, so rather than the flame wars, and the ugliness that is everywhere on the internet, TF Metals Report's not like that. We work really hard to not have it be like that. So anyway, it's $12 a month, but sometimes it's fun to put a coupon code out there. So for anybody watching, you go to TF Metals Report, you hit the subscribe button, you learn how to subscribe. You sign up for a monthly subscription at $12 a month, and you get a coupon code. Let's just call it SGT. You type in SGT. Into that coupon code, you get 50% off your first month. Save you a whole whopping $6. Stick around, it goes to 12 the next month. But if you want to kick the tires for 20 cents a day, here's a way to do it. So anyway, tfmetalsreport.com, coupon code SGT, and come learn about the metals. And this is a real significant, important time, economically, societally, all that kind of stuff. You learn a lot at the site. So please, stop by and join us.
Yeah, and guys, this is just my way of paying it forward. That SGT coupon code, I get nothing out of that. We have no arrangement between Craig and I. I'm just doing him the favor of shouting out his website. And, guys, if you want to support me, I really need patrons. You're my lifeline. All my stuff is free. I'm not behind a paywall, so Patreon is the best way to do it if you can help us out. $5 a month would help us a lot, and just stand by us. Stand by the truth tellers in this tyrannical fascist environment where big tech seems to do whatever they want and get away with it. Craig, let's just talk a little bit about the economy. The FOMC meeting was on Wednesday, June 10th. Now, I'm reading that Powell said no interest rate hikes for years,
Mhm.
and he's going to keep buying assets. Do you want to just break it down, and then we're going to go deeper, but what'd you make of the FOMC meeting?
But that particular news, there was three components to it. All of them just extraordinarily positive for the precious metals. Now, you don't see that so much in the day-to-day because you get the whims of the traders and then the computers and the algorithms and the pre-programmed stuff that, the silver price sees rally in the dollar intraday and all of a sudden falls by 2%. All that stuff's just noise. I mean, if you're trying to trade, and we can try to help with that, but if you're trying to trade, that stuff will drive you crazy. In the big picture, it's extraordinarily bullish stuff happened back in that FOMC. There's 3 points. One, you're right. You hit it. Powell saying that they're going to keep rates at 0 for the next 2.5 years, for God's sake. Talk about all this time we spent fretting meeting to meeting going, oh, they're going to be dovish and hawkish and all this other, mumbo jumbo. They're dovish now as far as the eye can see. So that's important. Also yesterday, the New York Fed announced that they're setting up kind of some formal guidelines for their QE program. They're going to buy $80 billion a month of treasuries. That's debt monetization to the tune of $1 trillion a year, or $960 billion.
Man.
But they're also going to buy another $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities, just like, the old QE program. So we're talking $1.5 trillion. That's at a minimum, Sean. Geez Louise. God forbid there's, we've got to have more economic, stimulus and debt monetization, everything else, because tax receipts are falling and all that stuff. The third part, though, and I apologize if I'm getting long-winded, but
no, this is important. I mean, it's insane. I mean, I can't quantify this stuff anymore. That's why I have guys like you on. $120 billion per month in QE.
Amazing. And here's the third part. And this is the most fundamentally positive thing. If for anybody that owns gold, wants to own the gold miners, that kind of stuff. The Fed is looking at something called yield curve control, rate caps, if you will. They've had a number of trial balloons floated with this, where, Fed researchers and economists have written these reports about how they've done this in the past. In fact, the last time debt to GDP was this high was after World War II, and that's when the Fed put in these yield curve controls, where they basically said, kind of like the old London gold pool, where if price goes outside of a certain band, they're going to sell. If it goes below, they're going to buy. That's what yield curve control is. They'll say, okay, if the interest rate on the 10-year note goes above, say, 1%, we're going to actively buy treasuries to drive it back down. If it falls below 0.5%, we're going to sell treasuries to push it back up, thereby creating this range. Okay. If they do that, then they're institutionalizing, if you will, nominal rates that won't rise above a certain level. Well, rates historically should rise anytime there's a bump up of inflation. And the inflation adjusted rate, and this is what gold goes off of in precious metal, plus or minus 1%, maybe, what that nominal rate is. Well, the Fed's going to cap nominal rates at, say, 1%. Well, all of this money printing, what the M2 money supply is up 30% or something in the last couple of months, and all of this debt monetization, eventually we're going to get into, if not inflation, stagflation. And so if rates are at 1% and inflation's at 1%, well, then you got a 0% inflation adjusted return. But if rates stay at 1 and inflation goes to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, like in the 70s, then you get a really steeply negative inflation adjusted return. And that's a huge boom for gold and silver. And that's like one of these big picture balls you got to keep your eyes on if you're investing or trading, and trying to make some money at this. And why is that? Because people prefer treasuries because they pay interest, right? And you get your principal back. If all of a sudden you're guaranteeing yourself a loss by buying treasuries of 2 or 3% a year of your purchasing power, well, then hell's bells, why wouldn't you own gold, right? Because the argument is, well, I don't own gold because it doesn't pay a dividend, right? It just pays dust. It's a pet rock and all that kind of stuff. Well, paying no dividend beats the crap out of a negative 2 or 3% return, right? And then you get upside. So again, long answer, but those were the 3 huge points that came out of that FOMC. And man, if we get later on in the summer, if people watching us remember anything other than the guy with the big nose and the gray beard, remember, you hear that the Fed is putting on yield curve controls. They're actually going to formally do that. Remember, that's really a very important turning point for the precious metals.
Let me do a screen share here. We'll show people the Brave browser, and I've got a couple things queued up for you that I wanted to talk about. Boy, what's going on in Seattle and Portland is just mind-boggling. But I had pre-typed this in. Do you see that? The Fed money printing. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I want to show you what YouTube is doing. I was looking for that 60 Minutes clip with Powell. Here's what you get when you type in the Fed money printing. You get a clip from 2 months ago, 7 years ago. Here's one from Chris Martenson 5 years ago. It's just a joke. So then I typed in the Fed, Jerome Powell, 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look what I get. So here it is, but they don't show you that clip, the famous clip that I know you've seen when he says, right, yes, we've been printing digitally, but he goes on to say, yes, we're just printing money out of thin air. I can't find that clip on YouTube. I tried via Bing. A lot of times I'll get better search results using Bing. I couldn't get it there either. So here we go. The Fed, Powell, the U.S. won't have negative interest rates. I looked through this whole playlist too from 60 Minutes, couldn't find anything about the money printing. Fed Chair Jerome Powell on income disparity. They've cleansed the search results because they don't want people to know the truth.
Right.
And we all know the truth, but maybe our friends, neighbors, and colleagues don't get it, Craig. These big social media companies are so corrupt at this point. Google, YouTube, they're so incredibly corrupt. It's a modern day book burning, Craig.
And what's frustrating to me, Sean, I just hate hearing stories like yours. You've worked so hard, and have them, be doing what they do to you and to other content providers. It just is nauseating. And the other part of it is what these people don't even see. They say they're anti-authoritarian and pro-democracy and anti-fascist and all this stuff. But the basic steps taken by every authoritarian fascist regime is this controlling of minds and speech. And if you're going to rat out your father, you're going to rat out, your brother, that kind of stuff for speaking against the regime or speaking out in an unpopular way. And that's exactly what they're doing. If you don't hold the right beliefs or what they believe the right beliefs, then you get demonetized, you get bastardized, you get thrown out. There are a number of current examples of this everywhere, but you saw that. I guess one of the things that immediately comes to mind is I read a great Twitter thread, I can't remember who it was, talking about the controversy at the New York Times recently because they ran an op-ed from the Senator Cotton from Arkansas and then retracted it and said, oh no, this is terrible, we can't. And it was because all of these, I don't know what you want to call them, really extra, ultra progressive journalism types that now populate the New York Times newsroom and their editorial board found what Cotton wrote to be offensive to them. And so what this thread went on to say was, the New York Times always used to have the motto of all the news that's fit to print. And how apparently now it's not, the emphasis is no longer on the word all, the emphasis is on the word fit. And that's what we're seeing. If you don't fit the narrative, if you don't fit what is deemed to be politically correct and appropriate, then you're just not going to be heard. And that's not the republic that we were born into, man. That is the very first step toward authoritarianism and the fascism that these people say they don't like, that they're against.
That's right. I'll play a clip from Tucker Carlson in a minute here for you, but that's exactly right. And I've been saying to my wife, I'm like, do these people, I've said it in interviews too, are they that stupid? Do they not understand history at all? Do they not know what communism brings? Do they not understand that more people have lost their lives under communist regimes than under any other regime that I know of in the past 100, 200 years? And do they not understand that if they usher in a communist government in this country, which is evidently, I think, what these Marxists want, including so many of these Democrats, they seem to be communist, all of those protected classes right now that want more equal rights than the rest of us get, all of those classes are the first to be done away with under communism, Craig. There will be no gay rights under communism, right? There will be no protected classes. We'll all just be serfs. So they're literally doing the bidding of the banksters with this stuff, destroying the cities, looting, chaos in the name of communism and equal rights. They are literally doing the bidding of the bankers.
Right. And they never, and I don't know if you know Mike Krieger of Liberty Blitzkrieg. He's been on this like crazy for the last couple of months on Twitter, but especially since this all flared up a couple of weeks ago. You really want to go protest someplace, you want to burn something down, go burn down your local Federal Reserve branch. They are the problem.
I know. Careful. You're saying that tongue in cheek, but I mean, literally, if we're watching them loot cities, we do wonder, why are they looting small businesses and not going after the real slave master?
I'm speaking metaphorically. How's that? Anyway, but it's true. I mean, the ultimate source of income and wealth inequality is the banking system, the monetary system. And look, I'm not just making this stuff up, man. Anybody, do this yourself. Start researching. Pull up, go to even the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. You type in FRED charts, F-R-E-D. It'll send you to their site with all this research. Even the Federal Reserve itself, look at their own charts. You go back, everything started to deteriorate. The America as we know it died, really, in 1971. When Nixon suspended the convertibility of the dollar into gold. And everything became untethered after that. I think back when I was a kid, my dad had a job. My mom taught school. We lived in a nice house in a normal neighborhood. My dad had a country club membership even, put 4 kids through college, all this stuff on, $40,000 a year. And now, it's just the amount of taxes and the 2 people having to work, and what they've done with healthcare costs and tuition costs, and it's out of control. And so the actual wealth disparity, the income disparity, actually goes back to the early 1970s when that changed. And it changed because in fighting this kind of Keynesian battle, if you will, beside where you had to make a choice between guns and butter, we decided that no, we want guns and butter. Okay, and we're just going to print as much cash as we need to pull that off. And now we're at the end of that. Okay, that went along and was serviceable and manageable for decades. But now the logical end is now upon us, where the debt is growing exponentially fast, especially with COVID now over the last 90 days. And so to service that debt, you've got to create more and more cash, more and more liquidity, just to kind of keep the wheel spinning. And at some point, as it just continues to grow and compound, you go parabolic. And that's kind of the phase we're getting into. History has shown in the past that every time that this has been tried, going all the way back to the Romans, it collapses on itself. And then the pendulum swings back to some form of, anchored sound money. And I'm sure that's where we're headed again. But boy, I don't think there's any doubt that right now we're in the end game, and that'll be good when this, eventually resets. Because again, the primary driver of the income inequality and the wealth inequality, everybody's worried about fighting the top 1%. Well, the primary driver of that is the banking system, the monetary system. And until that changes, or is forced to change, probably just continues, these problems continue to get worse.
I want to play a soundbite for you here from Bix Weir in a second about silver, because I agree with you. At some point, this system has to reset, and those that are prescient enough to own precious metals, and maybe Bitcoin, comment on Bitcoin if you'd like. Only 22 million of them will ever be made, or 21 million, whatever the number is, but they can't be printed, they can't be counterfeited like the US dollar by the Fed. So I think the Bitcoin story remains interesting.
Yeah.
But it really begs the question, how many people will be protected? How many people are prescient? I don't think there are that many. Well, the numbers are growing. More and more people are buying gold. more and more people are waking up to this Fed money printing. I guess I may as well play that soundbite for you now. Let me do a screen share here. So this is Bix talking about the insanity of the COMEX paper silver. Now, I just did an interview recently with Wes Christian about naked short selling. And in that interview, Craig, I mentioned to Wes that, well, that's pretty much what they're doing on the COMEX to cap the prices of silver and gold too. But unlike stocks, unlike companies that they want to drive to zero, they can't actually drive the prices of gold and silver to zero because they're tangible assets.
Right.
And in the real world, in physical form, limited quantities. They're in limited quantities. But here's what they're doing. Listen to Bix.
It doesn't matter what supply and demand is. It doesn't matter that all the mines in Mexico and South America, which produce most of the silver, have been shut down since the COVID thing. It doesn't matter how much physical silver is on the market. It doesn't matter how much silver you buy. It is a derivative game. It is fake. It is phony. As a matter of fact, you can see it by the COMEX futures numbers. Look at these numbers. Insane this week. Look at this. 111. That's 120,000 contracts, which is 600 million ounces of silver. 600 million ounces of silver traded yesterday to rig the price.
I'll pause it there and come back to you, Craig. I just want people to know what we're up against here. We feel stupid sometimes for having stacked silver over the last decade, but we only feel stupid because they're manipulating the price, and we have to come back to that truth time and time again because I don't know how long they're going to be able to get away with this.
Well, in some regards, you can see this now, right? The paper price, the derivative price, the price that you see on CNBC from trading these derivative contracts back and forth, is what, $18 an ounce? Can you go on eBay? Can you go to your local coin shop and buy any silver at $18 an ounce? No.
It's $10 over. It's $10 over for Silver Eagles.
So what's the real price? You know, even I had a buddy of mine that needed some cash. He was telling me the story 2 days ago. And so he actually sold some silver, called up his local coin shop guy that he bought it all from over the last 10 years and told him he wanted to sell him a couple hundred Eagles. And the guy was like, really? Great. I'll give you $2 over spot to sell. That never happens. And I'm sure the guy turned around and sold it, at another $2 or $4 or whatever. Moral of the story is there's an actual physical price now versus a paper derivative price. That ultimately, and you and I have been talking about this for years, that scheme will collapse once someone finally demands the actual physical silver or gold for that matter. But people need to understand this is not like just some conspiracy theory, where we're sitting around just bitching and moaning because price is going down. This is historical fact. Okay. And again, you can be lazy and sit there and just, whatever, someone says conspiracy theory, I don't care. Or you can actually do this work yourself. And you can go back, study your history, and find out, of course, that the U.S. was the sole gold standard, right? Dollar as good as gold, convertible $35 into an ounce of gold coming out of World War II to give the world some kind of monetary structure and confidence. So what happens, you start rebuilding the global economy, shipping dollars around the world, and you get countries like France, for example, that suddenly they sold some goods, they get dollars in return, they got a stockpile of dollars, and they say, well, we don't really want these dollars, we'd rather have some gold, so here's a whole pile of them, and we'll have gold. Well, by 1957 and 58, this was a huge crisis. I mean, there were hearings on Capitol Hill. It's kind of like, what was the Asian flu in 57 and 58 that killed 150,000 people that nobody even talks about, right? Anyway, again, study your history. This has happened before. We'd have to shut the whole economy down for it. There was hearings on Capitol Hill, all this stuff, because the U.S. had lost a full third of its gold reserves because of the convertibility. Okay, so then we said, well, screw this. We're not going to do this on our own anymore. And we formed with 7 other countries something called the London Gold Pool. And again, anybody can Google this stuff. Just Google London Gold Pool. Read about it yourself. Doing kind of like what I was talking about earlier with interest rate caps. Anytime price was forced above $35, the London Gold Pool would sell a bunch of physical gold and shove it back down. And then if price fell below $35, they'd buy a bunch, restock, whatever they had just sold, and then, get the price back to 35. Well, that worked for 7 years. And then the demand was so great, again, as dollar reserves continue to build and more people want gold instead of dollars, the whole gold pool fell apart. So now gold's finally free to trade, and Nixon closes the gold window because it's all continuing. Well, then in 1975, they come up with gold futures. And you can even find, WikiLeaks has even found the actual memos and cables from December 1974 talking about how, okay, we're going to set this up. This is going to siphon off demand for physical metal. In fact, it's going to be so volatile. The price is going to be so volatile and scare people out of even wanting physical gold. It'll be great. In the meantime, all of us banks are going to make a mint. And that's exactly what has happened.
Yeah.
And it's like alchemy. They've convinced the world that futures contracts and unallocated accounts where you're storing metal at, Kitco or UBS or the Perth Mint or someplace. They say, oh, yeah. Just sign here. We'll hold your gold for you. Don't worry about it. If you want it, just give us 6 months and we'll get it to you. That's an unallocated account. The ETFs, all this stuff is all synthetic forms of gold ownership. The futures contracts that Bix is talking about is the exact same thing. There's no physical metal there. They're just these baseball cards, basically. And the swapping of which is somehow allowed as a price determinator for the actual physical metal. It's a joke. So anyway, I'm sorry to go on this rant, but not enough people understand this. They think that the price that you see that's, quoted on CNBC, where the banks are is investigating that, that's somehow the fair price. Well, again, call up your local coin shop, see if that's the fair price. Go on eBay, see if that's the price. But then also understand your history, and you'll quickly know that that's not the price.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And you'll recall that the Rothschilds used to set the price of gold twice a day, I think, over there in London. And they got out of that game in around 2004, 2006, something like that. So maybe they saw the writing on the wall too. I don't know. I'm hearing that Scotiabank is trying to get out of their, they're one of these premier dealers, or what do you call them?
A bullion bank?
Bullion bank. They're trying to close that. They don't want to do it anymore. They're losing hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
They own Makata. They bought Makata a couple decades ago. Makata being the original from like the 17th century, the original bullion dealer in London. So if you want to say that the original, Scotiabank having roots going back 400 years, 350 years, whatever it is, has finally just run. It's not, from a business standpoint, it's just not worth it for a lot of these banks because the regulatory environment, again, we got JP Morgan traders and the like being investigated under RICO statutes.
Right.
Okay. And plus there's not a lot of money to be made at it anymore. So these banks, and plus, get the hell out of Dodge while you can. You don't want to be the last person holding the bag, from a being short standpoint when this house, finally collapses.
Well, absolutely. And we're hearing that the COMEX is so short on gold that they need to get it flown in from the LBMA in London. So, these warehouses are on fire, figuratively speaking. Of course, you'll remember the flood back in 2012, we're told, that flooded the DTCC basement. So 36.5 trillion in securities may have been damaged. Boy, the system's on fire. All right. One more screen share, one more topic, and we've already sort of hit on it. It's the hypocrisy of the Democrats in the left. It's just so out of control. They want us to shutter down the economy, shelter in place in the name of COVID and waiting for Bill Gates to find a vaccine. Meanwhile, Antifa gets to run wild and control Portland and Seattle in autonomous zones. We've never seen anything like it. Here's Tucker Carlson.
The effect of that is economic disaster. Most small businesses run on very small margins. They can't survive for long, and in fact, many have failed. What should they do? They should join Antifa, obviously, because in King County, Washington, Antifa can do whatever Antifa wants to do. Tonight, they've taken over an entire 6-block section of downtown Seattle. And that's fine with health authorities there. No social distancing required. They're essential. You getting the picture? Is this adding up to a message? Yes. The message is you were played. We were all played. Corrupt politicians scared us into giving up control over the most basic questions in our own lives. At the same time, they gave more power to their obedient followers, like Antifa, while keeping the rest of us trapped at home and censored online.
Censored online, that's right. I'll come back to you there, Craig. They've jumped the shark, man. The Democrats have jumped the shark, and I personally do not see how they don't get absolutely smoked in November. Because even if you're a hardcore Democrat in New York, watching your city get looted, it's hard for me to see you wanting to reelect de Blasio or Cuomo. And now these folks in Seattle, I don't know, man. I just think the Democrats are burning down their own house. What do you think?
I think it's going to be interesting to watch, Sean, because I mean it could go the other way. I keep telling people on my site, they're like, "There's no way Biden's going to beat Trump," and then I remind people, I mean, it was only 4 years ago. All Biden has to do is win all the states that Hillary won, and then flip a couple that Hillary ignored. You know, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, that Trump, was able to sneak in and win. And Biden wins. I mean, so it's not like it's out of the question. Mm-hmm. And the flip side of that make it so interesting is if, like 4 years ago, we go into it, everybody thinking, oh, for sure, Biden's going to win, and the Democrats are going to take over both houses of Congress and all this kind of stuff. Remember what is it, 538? Is that the prediction site? And they're like, day of the election, it was 95% Hillary was going to win. So everybody thought for sure it was a done deal. Well, if we go into this year, everybody thinks it's a done deal.
Right. And
then, like you said, people go to the polls and go, screw this, I'm not voting for that. And they're killing us here. And all of a sudden, the Republicans win. Can you even imagine? I mean, what we've lived through for the last 4 years of people, saying it was a corrupt election, illegal election, voter fraud, all this kind of stuff. Oh my God, that stuff's going to go into hyperdrive, that type of rhetoric. So it's just going to be, let me put it this way. I saw somebody on Twitter, maybe I'm on Twitter too much, can I keep referencing it? Somebody on Twitter said, future historians will specialize in quarters of 2020.
Yeah.
That's probably right.
Yeah, it's been the rockiest, craziest year. I can't even believe it, man. Anybody that would have predicted this, they'd be calling you Nostradamus. Yeah, we're going to shut down the economy on the back of a pandemic.
Yeah, dude. I mean, from day one, hell, it was January the 2nd. I was sitting in the airport flying home from California, and we're going to war with Iran, right? Because they killed the Soleimani guy. I'm like, oh God, what is this about? And it's been relentless ever since. The only thing I'll tell you though, I mean, I'm sorry, I've been a shameless plug here in a sense, but some of this, you can see coming. I mean, you could see in November of 18, when, the Fed was trying to draw it, they're pulling this line for 5 years about drawing down the balance sheet, normalizing interest rates. It was crap. Anybody knew that wasn't going to happen. And they finally got the 10-year note over 3%, and the stock market crashed, up until Christmas Eve when Mnuchin got the plunge protection team together on an emergency conference call, and magically day after Christmas, then shoots higher. But you knew in 19, that day, that game was over, and they were going to have to start cutting rates. And that's exactly what they were. And so the report I wrote in the beginning of 19 was that the prices are going to have the best year that they've had since 2010 and break out of the range, below 1350 where they'd been for 6 years. And people thought I was crazy. Well, you just look, all you gotta do is look at it. You can see this was coming. And so anyway, that ended up being right. And for this year so far, even though who could have predicted COVID, I figured it would continue because, again, there's no looking back. There's this idea that the Fed is going to somehow quit adding money to service all this debt is ridiculous. There's just no way out. All they can do now is monetize it directly and openly admit that they're monetizing it directly. And if you understand those basic points, then you can see some of this stuff coming. But this year has just been, nobody could predict what has happened. And so to your point about the election, man, I think nobody can predict what's going to happen either. This is just crazy, and it's going to continue.
Yeah, and I am afraid of election theft, election fraud, so I don't know.
Yeah, and it could go the other way too, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then the whole country is so polarized now, right? There's no middle ground. There's nobody, thinks, okay, you and I, we have some things in common and some things not in common. No, all anybody wants to look at is the stuff that we don't have in common, mm-hmm. And so nobody trusts the other side. And so I just don't see where it ends well, because again, if the Democrats win, the Republicans are going to get, then the Trump supporters are going to be all pissed off thinking, somehow, whatever, it was stolen, and the opposite's going to be true. And I just don't like the way it's going. And you mentioned Seattle and these other cities. I shudder to think what happens if, in order to restore law, in order to restore take power away from these anarchists, what's ultimately going to have to be done? And then you think, well, God, what then happens after that? So anyway, I'm sorry, I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but all of this uncertainty is just, it impacts your finances, no doubt about that. And so people have to be paying attention to all of it.
Yeah, it's just so frustrating too, you know, because for those of us who are prescient enough to have bought precious metals over the years, we continue to not be rewarded for doing the right thing, really morally and logically, you know, because meanwhile, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Tesla, I mean, that's where all of this money printing seems to be going, is into those big NASDAQ stocks. So at some point, though, we all know that things revert to the mean. We just don't know when that will be. So we'll just stay the course, though, and keep trying to do the right thing. And at the end of the day, that's all we can do. Correct.
Well, and Sean, you know, it's not necessarily a black and white, you know, binary choice either. You know, investing in anything should never be, you know, the whole egg in one basket thing.
Right.
You know, precious metals serve a purpose, whether it's investment insurance, hedge against inflation, hedge against the monetary system falling apart or whatever. But I mean, just as like you wouldn't put all of your money into real estate, or you wouldn't put all your money into Apple or something. I mean, diversification is always going to be important regardless, because again, what I always tell people, Sean, and I mean, I'm sure you probably mentioned this before too. One of the first things I learned when I became a stockbroker in 1990, that's how old I am. A guy who was the chief strategist at Payne Weber back then was a guy by the name of Art Cashin. Cashin was famous for saying, you don't want to go around predicting the end of the world because you're only going to be right once, right?
I remember Art Cashin, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't like to go around predicting the end of the world. You know, and you think, yeah, would I like to see all that silver of mine go to $200 an ounce? Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fun. And then you start thinking, I wonder what's going on in the world at $200. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that kind of plays into my mind too. But I'm glad I own it. And there's never been a day over the last, I mean, because I bought silver all this time from 2011 on. You know, a lot of people act as if the only ounce of silver they ever bought was at $48 on April the 29th or whatever, 2011. I've just continued to buy it, and I've never lost a wink of sleep thinking, damn,
right,
why did I sell all that metal stuff and buy myself, you know, the S&P or something?
Right. No, I hear you. And, you know, that argument about, well, what does the world look like at $200 silver? It's just, you know, the thing is so manipulated at this point that $200 silver would still be a tiny amount.
Yeah,
the whole
probably.
market cap of silver would still be tiny because we live in a world with $2,000 a share Amazon stock.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like if Bitcoin went to $50,000 per Bitcoin, that really isn't going to have an impact on our friends, neighbors, and colleagues or the economy.
That's true.
Well, that's true. It's just a place for some of this fiat to go. And,
that's a good point. And you know, if the bullion banks crumble and take down an actual bank with them, I'm sure the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England or somebody would step in and bail them out anyway. So yeah, what am I worried about there? Let's go.
Sorry.
Let's go. Let's take silver to the moon then, for crying out loud.
No, it's our turn, man. It's our turn. I think our time is coming.
Well, and if anything, just like, you know, maintaining this debt Ponzi, and really that's what it is, you know, just this exponential growth of the total amount of debt, whether it's in the U.S. or globally, and then you got to print more and more cash to try to service it. That's the same thing that's going on with these precious metals. And just as that is inevitable, that collapse, because it's always happened in the past whenever it's been tried. This pricing scheme, this digital derivative, and it's a fractional reserve pricing scheme for precious metals, it's going to collapse too. No doubt in my mind that that's eventually going to happen, and we just have to wait for it.
Yeah. Well, you're a great guy, man. I've known you for a long time, and we don't talk that often, but every time I reach out, you're more than eager and willing to come on and give us your time. And I told you maybe we'd talk a half hour. We're damn near an hour into this thing. So thanks so much, Craig.
Well, that's my fault, man. I try really hard to watch. I do these podcasts every day where it's unscripted, like 20 minutes. I've gotten so used to just like talking endlessly that what I need is like a virtual, like one of those vaudeville hooks. You can just like, pull me off like that, whatever I can. So anyway, the reason we went on so long is I talked too much. So
No, untrue. I had a lot to talk to you about, so I really appreciate your banter and helping us try to get through this stuff. I mean, complicated times, that's an understatement. I just can't believe how crazy things have gotten, even in our own country. It shouldn't be this difficult. We have a constitution, a Bill of Rights. You know, if social media companies would actually abide by those things,
right?
Boy, in my opinion, we'd be a lot better off. All right, guys, our guest has been Craig Hemke. TFMetalsReport.com is the website. Craig, thank you.
Sean, my pleasure. All the best to you. And I got to see if I'm going to put some on my site, get people over to yours and check out that Patreon account, because the last thing we need is for YouTube to win. We need to keep you going. I want to make sure you survive all this stuff. You're too important.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the kind words and any help or support. And guys, again, just a quick reminder, you can always find my latest 3 videos sticky posted at the very top of sgtreport.com, and that is the source for real news 24 hours a day, the antidote to corporate propaganda. So please visit us directly there. And thank you so much to our patrons. Thanks for your support, guys. Thanks for liking this video, and thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend. God bless.